My name is Olivia Nelson, and I recently turned 30. Today, I want to share a pivotal moment in my life that shaped who I am. I have an older brother named Scott, who is 2 years my senior. From a young age, Scott was known as the neighborhood's heartthrob. His striking features and charismatic charm attracted attention, with whispers of talent scouts from modeling agencies seeking him out. He was handsome, intelligent, and quick-witted, traits that made him a favorite among family and friends. In contrast, I was always a bit chubbier. Despite sharing similar facial features with Scott, my extra weight seemed to overshadow any charm I might have had. I was shy, reserved, and not particularly talkative, so I never received the same praise for my intellect or personality. It quickly became apparent that people around us saw us as opposites. Our parents, too, seemed to notice this disparity. By the time I reached elementary school, it felt like their interest in me waned. My academic performance didn't measure up to Scott's, and I struggled with my weight. While Scott enjoyed afternoon snacks, I was often left out, and despite my efforts, my weight remained a constant issue. My mother would laugh and remark, "You're as round as a ball," and while I didn't understand the full implication of her words as a child, I now see that I was often the subject of her jokes. Scott always seemed to have new clothes and shoes for every occasion: his birthday, a goal scored at soccer, and so on. Meanwhile, I received his hand-me-downs, despite being the girl. This meant not just clothes but shoes as well. I lost count of the times I tripped because the shoes didn't fit properly. The only item I truly cherished was the backpack my grandparents had given me before they passed away. When Scott graduated from elementary school and moved on to a private middle school, my parents were thrilled. His acceptance into such a prestigious institution was a source of great pride. Around this time, Scott's looks caught the attention of talent scouts, leading to opportunities in child modeling. My mother, in particular, took great pleasure in showcasing Scott's appeal. She often took him on busy streets like Fifth Avenue, almost as if she were saying, "Look at how handsome my son is." I, on the other hand, don't recall ever going out with her after I became aware of my surroundings. When Scott suggested, "Next time, let's take Olivia with us too," I sensed he knew even then that I was being left out. Yet my mother would only grimace and reply, "Yes, someday." Rather than feeling pleased by Scott's thoughtfulness, I felt a deep sense of misery. A few years later, I started middle school as well, but unlike Scott, I attended a regular public school. My parents had never set high expectations for me, and it felt like they had no intention of supporting me academically. My father even said, "I can't afford to spend money on you." While I never particularly wanted to attend a private school, being told from the start that my options were limited left me feeling trapped. As a child, I often wondered, is this how it is with siblings? I didn't have a clear picture of what other families were like. By the time I was born, the dysfunction of our household felt like the norm. As I went through puberty, I started to question why I was treated so differently from Scott. Unfortunately, the situation only seemed to get worse. Despite my mother being a stay-at-home mom, she frequently left me with household chores and errands while she socialized with her friends. My father, when I asked to play with friends, would retort, "What about the household chores?" Scott always looked out for me, helping and even defending me to our parents, but they never took his concerns seriously when it came to how they treated me. As Scott prepared for high school entrance exams and moved on to a top prep school, he became too occupied to pay much attention to me or our home. That's when I truly began to understand the depths of my isolation. One significant sign was their absence from parent-teacher meetings. In most families, missing such meetings would be a big deal, but for mine, it was just an afterthought. During my 3 years in middle school, my parents only attended one meeting. They missed all meetings in my first and second years, and even the crucial meetings in my third year, when exams were looming. My homeroom teacher was concerned, but I brushed off their worries. I knew my situation wasn't typical, but my parents weren't physically abusive, so I didn't know how to articulate the ongoing mental anguish I was experiencing. It felt too shameful to admit, as if I were confessing, "I'm a child not cherished by her own parents." The neglect continued with incidents like the New Year's Eve abandonment. At the end of that year, my parents took Scott to my mom's hometown, leaving me behind. While I had been included in past years, this time they said, "You're a student preparing for exams, so stay home and study." I suspected that studying was just an excuse. They likely found me a nuisance. I ended up spending New Year's Eve alone. I didn't want to ask a friend to hang out, as it felt too much like admitting, I'm a lonely kid left behind, so I stayed home, avoiding contact with anyone. I tried to mask my sadness while watching the Grammys and the New Year's Eve specials. Eventually, I went to bed after shedding a few tears, holding back the pain. The next morning, I was jolted awake by the persistent ringing of the doorbell. Startled and disoriented, I leaped out of bed, surprised by the early hour. I checked the doorbell camera nervously and saw my uncle and aunt from my mom's side standing there. Confused and with bedhead, I hurried to the door and asked, "What's going on?" "Olivia, you need to leave this house," my uncle said abruptly. "We've already spoken to your mom about this. Don't worry, we'll handle all the formalities." "What do you mean?" I stammered, bewildered by his stern tone. I couldn't grasp why I was being asked to leave. "Olivia," my aunt said gently, tears welling up in her eyes, "we want to adopt you. We don't have children of our own, but since you were born, we've always considered you our daughter." At the time, I couldn't fully understand what was happening. My aunt and uncle, unable to have children due to illness, had always showered me with affection during their visits. They had often criticized my parents for their treatment of me, and I knew they cared deeply for me. They had been my refuge, spending time with me when my parents were preoccupied with Scott. My aunt played with me, while my uncle brought me the latest treats and clothes. The moments I shared with them were far more numerous and cherished than those with my parents. My uncle, who had just spoken with my parents, began with, "Your parents don't plan on letting you go to high school. They've said that when you turn 16, they expect you to start working to help fund Scott's college education. We can't ignore this. Olivia, you have every right to go to school, and you shouldn't have to sacrifice your future for the family." I was stunned. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. My parents were prepared to sacrifice my future for Scott's benefit. It became clear why they had skipped parent-teacher meetings for years. They were indifferent to my education and dreams. They seemed to see me as a burden rather than a person with potential. As I collapsed in shock, my aunt and uncle knelt beside me, offering comfort. "We may not be your biological parents, and this might feel strange," my aunt said, her voice trembling with emotion, "but we promise to make sure you're happy." She hugged me tightly, tears streaming down her face. "Olivia, you deserve to be happy. We should have come for you sooner. If you're willing, we want you to become our daughter," my uncle added, his eyes red and earnest as he looked at me. At just over 10 years old, I was faced with a decision that felt both overwhelming and clarifying. For the first time, I felt truly desired and valued by adults. I made the choice to become their adopted daughter. Fast forward 10 years since they took me in. My aunt and uncle have enveloped me in love and provided countless joyful experiences. My aunt delighted in choosing clothes for me and took me shopping on special occasions. My uncle, who had always wanted to share a drink with his daughter, kept a bottle of wine from the year I was born for my 21st birthday. We traveled together, and my uncle's childlike enthusiasm led us to zoos and aquariums even during my high school years. These moments are unforgettable, forming memories that far surpass anything I experienced with my biological parents. At first, I called them aunt and uncle, but over time, they became my parents in every sense. I now call them mom and dad. I later learned that when my biological parents visited them, they drunkenly remarked, "Olivia's just hopeless. She's not cute, and her looks are, well, lackluster. She's not smart either. Honestly, we don't need a stupid daughter. We have our excellent eldest son, Scott." My aunt and uncle were outraged by these comments. When my parents mentioned they wouldn't let me go to high school, the idea of adoption became a serious consideration. I'm eternally grateful to my aunt who drove to me in the middle of the night on New Year's Eve, not having been drinking. I wanted to repay my wonderful parents for all they had done. I aimed to become a daughter they would be proud to have adopted. With that goal in mind, I threw myself into my studies after starting high school. The high school entrance exams were tumultuous, and I struggled to focus fully. But once I was in high school, I dedicated myself to ensuring my future would not be a disappointment to my aunt and uncle. My efforts bore fruit, and I gained admission to a prestigious public university. Still, I felt it wasn't enough to fully express my gratitude to my dear parents. I wanted to make their lives easier and continue to honor their sacrifice. During college, I obtained a weather forecaster license and began appearing on television. I also worked hard on my health and fitness, earning the nickname Beautiful Weather Forecaster. Looking back, I always resembled my brother and had the potential to be beautiful as well. My aunt and uncle frequently told me how proud they were, but I felt I had finally become the daughter they could truly be proud of. I owed them so much and was determined to show my gratitude through my efforts. Just as I was reflecting on this, my biological parents suddenly appeared before me. Olivia, oh, you've grown so much. You've become such a fine young lady, they said, tears welling up in their eyes as they clung to me. I was about to leave the TV station and get into my car when this happened, and I was momentarily disoriented. Honestly, I hadn't seen them for so long that I didn't even recognize them at first. We saw you on TV and couldn't believe our eyes, Scott said. It's Olivia. We never expected you to become such a beautiful woman and a weather forecaster. That's amazing. My father, with a patronizing smile, patted me on the shoulder and said, just as we expected from our daughter. We're so proud. I couldn't hide my disgust and shot them a cold glare, but they seemed oblivious to my reaction. Oh, by the way, my mother continued, since we've met, why don't we have a meal at that fancy restaurant up ahead? You must be earning a lot as a weather forecaster, right? What were they up to? It felt like they had been lying in wait for me like stalkers, now trying to get a free meal and possibly benefit from my success. I couldn't let them take advantage of me. I had to find a way to set boundaries and ensure they wouldn't intrude on my life again. I quickly devised a plan. Mom, Dad, it's great to see you, but I have another job scheduled today, so I can't join you for a meal. Sorry, I said. Of course, I didn't have another job. I had actually planned to take my beloved aunt and uncle out for a meal at a fancy restaurant to celebrate their wedding anniversary. Oh, that's a shame, my mother replied, clicking her tongue slightly. Could you share your contact information with us? I'm hosting a small party for my birthday soon and will be inviting people from the TV station. There will be plenty of delicious food, and it'll be quite elegant, so I'd love for you to come. My parents' faces lit up at the prospect. Really? How fortunate. Will there be actors there as well? Absolutely, I said with a smile. Little did they know, no actors would be present. The gathering would be a modest affair with weather reporters, newspaper, and TV station staff. The most glamorous attendees would be announcers and a few TV personalities. My parents, expecting a grand event, were delighted. I maintained my smile and said, see you at the party, before heading off. A month later, as planned, I booked a venue for my birthday party. Despite its small size, the event drew a good crowd, thanks to the rented party space. My parents arrived, enthusiastically waving and calling out, Olivia? They made it clear they wanted everyone to know they were my parents, which really annoyed me. Dad, Mom, welcome. Could you please head to the dressing room right away? They'll assist with everything from clothes to makeup. Your outfits are lovely, but they also have designer clothes available for rent. Enjoy the experience while you're here. My parents' faces lit up with delight. Their excitement was palpable. Designer clothes? How wonderful. I rarely get a chance to wear such things. I hope they suit me. Mom, you gained a bit of weight, I said casually. Oh, don't be silly, she replied, brushing off the comment. Despite their excitement, their outfits were hilariously inappropriate. My mother wore a pale pink mini dress that exposed her shoulders, more suitable for a young woman than someone her age. My father had chosen a bright red suit with a flashy tie adorned with yellow and green geometric patterns. Even without a dress code, no one would select such a mismatched combination. The clothes were indeed designer labels, but they were second-hand, something I had chosen deliberately to evoke memories of a family party from my childhood. My parents, believing the designer labels were a mark of high fashion, were thrilled as long as I kept telling them how well the outfits suited them. While they used to heed every word from my exceptional brother Scott, now they were on the receiving end of such praise from me, having shifted the spotlight onto myself. When the party began, it was time for me to give my speech. Before heading to the stage, I told my parents, I have a special message for both of you in my speech today, so please pay close attention. They looked at me with surprise but kept their expressions of happiness. I started my speech with, thank you all for coming to my birthday party today. I'd also want to extend my gratitude to everyone who helped organize this event. My friends teased me, shouting, you're so formal. You're not usually like this. I'm just being myself, I joked, then turned toward my parents. They're right over there, I said, pointing to them. The lighting staff quickly spotlighted my parents. These are my biological parents who, despite abandoning me during my teenage years, had the nerve to appear on TV and even ambush me here today. A murmur of surprise swept through the crowd. I had only shared details of my past with close friends. What? How could you say that? My mother exclaimed, rising from her seat. My father remained stunned into silence. From kindergarten, my parents had always compared me to my high-achieving older brother Scott, favoring him over me. I was the one who never received treats and had to wear Scott's hand-me-down clothes until grade school. Despite this, I loved them. During middle school, they imposed excessive household chores on me and declared they wouldn't allow me to attend high school, even skipping parent-teacher conferences. That's when my compassionate uncle and aunt stepped in and adopted me. It feels strange to say this about myself, but I'm generally quite cheerful. My uncle and aunt consistently reminded me, with their loving support, that I was not a bad child. They helped me build my confidence and overcome my shyness, shaping me into the positive person I am today. My usual upbeat demeanor starkly contrasts with my difficult past. The audience was stunned by my revelation. Whispers of "how awful" and "how could they show up dressed like that at their daughter's birthday" began to spread through the crowd. Criticism of my parents grew louder as they felt the weight of the disapproving glares. Overwhelmed, my parents lowered their heads and trembled. Yet I hold no ill will towards my parents. If not for them, I wouldn't have found my true family, my uncle and aunt, who have given me the warmth and love of a real family. To my parents, who seemed to be hoping for some acknowledgement or twist, I simply offered a quiet smile. "Mr. Treasure from the Daily Info, are you here? Please turn this story and these photos into an article. Consider it my birthday present." I called out to a friend from the magazine who had started taking pictures of my parents. "Hey, stop that. Don't take any more pictures." My parents scrambled to shield their faces, frantic and embarrassed. "Shameless to the very end," I exclaimed. "You always made me do things I didn't want to do, even when I pleaded with you to stop. You can't force others and expect to escape the consequences yourself." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry. If you turn this into an article, it will also damage your mother and father. You wouldn't want that, would you, Olivia?" I was stunned by her audacity. "Do you really think I still see you as my parents? You barely raised me and completely abandoned your responsibilities. My real parents are my uncle and aunt. They are the only ones I consider as my mother and father. Don't ever try to interfere in my life again." As I spoke, tears streamed down my face and I felt a deep sense of gratitude for my uncle and aunt. The attendees, witnessing my emotional state, intervened and escorted my parents out of the venue. It was over. I had finally severed all ties with them. As a child, I had distanced myself to find refuge with my uncle and aunt, but now I had truly cut them out of my life. Feeling a mix of accomplishment and gratitude, I let a few more tears fall, reflecting on how far I had come. The magazine editor asked, "Are you sure you're okay with this?" "Yes, please proceed," I affirmed. The story turned out to be quite sensational and was picked up by numerous TV shows. Despite initial concerns about potential damage to my image, the narrative of a girl overcoming her past and making a dramatic turnaround resonated widely, a modern Cinderella story. The press coverage was largely positive, enhancing my reputation rather than harming it. On the other hand, my biological parents faced significant fallout. They were met with cold shoulders from neighbors and had to move to a new house. The scandal quickly spread through my father's workplace, leading him to resign. My mother, previously a homemaker, was also left without a job. Scott, ever concerned for me, visited my new home with my aunt and uncle. Initially, he had hoped for us to reunite and live together again, but he soon recognized that it was best for me to stay with my adoptive family. He was genuinely happy for me, confident that I had made the right choice. Throughout my college years, Scott continued to support and guide me in my studies. 5 years have passed since then. I married Mr. Treasure, who worked at the magazine that published my story, and we have twin children, a boy and a girl. As a mother, I am committed to ensuring my children are treated equally and can grow up in a joyful and nurturing environment, much like the selfless love my aunt and uncle provided, and the care my brother Scott showed. I want them to grow up kind and compassionate, just as I was raised to be. Beyond parenting, I am dedicated to repaying my aunt and uncle's kindness. This year, for our wedding anniversary, I surprised them with a trip to Oregon, which we enjoyed together with my husband and children. My aunt and uncle often say, "Olivia, you have your own family now. You don't need to do this." But for me, giving back is a true joy, not a duty. It brings me happiness to see their delighted faces. I jokingly tell them, "Don't take away my pleasure," as I plan our next surprise, a luxurious family hotel stay. There are still many adventures and memories I want to create with my loved ones.